evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted Southern Horror Queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. And happy Mardi Gras to all you crazy party goers out there. Keep the shirts down, ladies. I hear they're handing out tickets left and right. I would probably have several in my back pocket by now, but I'm being good tonight, and I'm broadcasting live from The Edge Radio. I'm here to tell all you creepy kids about all kinds of macabre and scary and bizarre things tonight, as usual, right? I've already got Wade Quavers, the Moonshine Man, in the house. How you doing tonight, Wade? I see you're at home being good, too. It sucks, doesn't it? Kenya, good to see you. And my boy, Freddie, always good to see you, dear. Speaking of all the things that I'm committed to doing, the furtherment of your corruption. And there's other people that are into that, like our little friends over at The Lineup. Have you guys got your creepy crate yet? Oh my God, what the hell are you waiting for? Our little creepy friends over at The Lineup risk life and limb scouring the darkest and dankest dungeons from some of the most haunting places on this bizarre little planet, just to find the most creaky and macabre little collector's items for lovers of horror just like us. Every one of these little crates is just stuffed full of awesome collectibles, and, you know, folks like us, the people that listen to the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show, we love all those creepy little things, and they love us over at The Lineup. In fact, they watch the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show in New York. Can you believe that? That's some madness right there, right? Well, they love the show, and they love all the creepy kids that listen to the show. Now, all the stuff that they cram into these boxes, we're already getting an awesome discount on it. We're paying like a third of the retail value for all these creepy little trinkets. But because we're special creepy kids, I am the Twisted Southern Horror Queen, and you are my horde, they're giving us an extra $5 off when we subscribe. How can you pass that up? Only you guys have access to that. Brandon, you gotta get your creepy crate, I'm telling you. Go to authorlyngibson.com. Right there on the homepage, the top right-hand corner. No, Brandon, the other right-hand corner. That's it, the little creepy crate box. Click that. And after you read about it and you see all the cool stuff that they do and you're ready to subscribe, make sure you hit checkout with the coupon code TWISTED, and you'll get your extra $5 off. So any minute now, I'm waiting for my newest delivery to come in. And as soon as it does, I'm going to do a live opening or unveiling of the creepy crate, so you guys can see what all comes in it. It's going to be awesome. Look forward to that. All right, so I got to give out a little bit more love tonight for some other creepy kids, like the sponsors for the Adrian's Fury Dragster. We got D&M Graphics, Surreal Studios, Renegade Racing Fuel, Amalay Oil, Hawaiian Shine. Oh my God, I love that stuff. You listen to the Whiskey Cars and Cigar Show. You're going to hear all about that. And of course, my favorite, Naked Wines. Get naked, I'm telling you right now. You want to try Naked Wines out? Drop me a line. I'll send you a $100 coupon card for it. Free shipping. How can you beat that? This is an awesome product. And I'm telling you, you drink enough, somebody's getting naked. It's Valentine's Day. If you haven't already used your $100 voucher for Naked Wines, it's a little late now, guys. And I don't think Mad Dog's going to do it for her. Man, that's awesome stuff. All right, so we got all our little creepy sponsors shouted out for. So now it's about that time. You guys know what time it is. Y'all should just go ahead and say it with me. It's time to dim the lights, kick out the damn kids, and lock the door. Make sure the little bastards don't get back in. And, of course, grab your tasty adult beverage, because we're about to get our creepy on. All right. So I thought I would get the party started right, and we're going to talk about some crazy cursed relics. Everybody loves cursed relics, right? Hey, Ronnie and Lori Owens, glad to see you guys joining me tonight. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so The first little relic I'm going to tell you guys about is the woman from Lim. And if you're not already familiar with that, it's not really much to look at. It's kind of a freaky looking phallic statue. It stands, I guess, 6 to 8 inches tall, maybe. A lot of people refer to her as the goddess of death. Now, it's not real certain what she's supposed to stand for, what god she represents, but she was found in an archaeological dig in Lim, Cyprus in 1878. She's been raising hell ever since then. It's crazy, kind of like me, just a different birthday. Anyway, when I say she was old, of course, she's very old. They've done some dating on her, and it looks like she's coming from around, or was originated around 3500 BC. So, yes, a very old relic, and God only knows what kind of mystic things are attached to that. So, very mysterious little broad, but that's not her biggest draw. Like I said, she's not very attractive, not very many features, kind of bizarre looking, and we don't really know what she is or who she represents. But it's her more recent history that's got some really scary shit going on with it. Check this out. The first private owner that actually had her was a dude named Lord Elfine. And within the first 6 years of him owning this freaky looking little relic, all 7 members of the Elfont family died these bizarre and mysterious deaths. Now, the second owner was Ivar Minucci. And he had about the same luck with her. He only owned her for 4 years, but in that 4 years, he and all of his family members also died under some very freakish circumstances. So then came the third owner, and his name was Lord Thompson Noel. Yeah, you're catching on. He and his entire family were dead within 4 years of him taking possession of this death goddess statue. So after a while, or after this incident, this third owner, this little relic disappears for a while off the face of the planet. Nobody knows where she went, who had her, or what the case may be. My thoughts are somebody dug a deep hole and stuck that little bitch in it and covered her up and hoped that nobody'd ever dig her back up. But that didn't forget. Oh, I'm being told by Big Johnny Blender, who's stalking me from downstairs tonight, not to forget RacerDirect.net. I don't know how I would have skipped over those guys. They're the dudes that's building the fire suit for the Adrian's Fury Dragster, actually for Big Johnny Blender to wear in the Adrian's Fury Dragster. So that ought to be making its arrival here pretty soon. It'll probably come in the same time as a Creepy Crate. We won't know which one to open first. But anyway, we should always have issues like that. So, again, I said she disappeared, and eventually she did turn back up. It was several years later, and she shows up in the possession of a gentleman named Sir Alan Beaverbrook. Well, it wasn't very long before he and his wife and his 2 daughters are all dead. No shit, y'all. But the kicker with this is Beaverbrook had 2 older sons that did not live in the same house, and they were not exposed to the woman from Lim statue. Now, neither one of these sons were superstitious in any way, but they weren't stupid either. So they decided that neither one of them were going to take possession of this relic, and they donated it to the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh, where it's still sitting today. Think things changed just because she went to go stay at a museum? Not so much. Shortly after she was donated, the chief of the section where she was on display at suddenly and mysteriously drops dead. Still today, that museum, the guy that's running the museum, says that he will neither confirm nor deny that there's some kind of super creepy supernatural ability that's emitting from this little statue. However, the last person, of course, that died was the one who placed her in the case where she is today. And no one in the museum will touch her. No one will clean her case. She sits there and gets kind of dusty. But she hasn't caused any harm ever since she's been placed in that case. And plenty of visitors go there to check her out and take pictures of her every year. And they seem to be okay. So apparently she's not able to penetrate that glass and do any more harm from where she's sitting. All right, so if you guys are up to another cursed item, that's good because, of course, I don't do just one of anything. We've got a bunch of cursed relics tonight. This one is called the Anguished Man painting. And it, too, is not very much to look at, and it's actually kind of unsettling, even in my opinion. So that kind of tells you something about it right there. But even more so if you know the legend that's behind it. So watch out for my blog this Friday, because I believe I'm going to do it on the Anguished Man. And that way you'll at least be able to see what I'm talking about. So this painting was actually given to a woman, and she really didn't want it. It was an unwanted gift that she tried to display in her house for a while, but things started happening. So it wound up being locked up in her attic for 25 years or longer than that. Well, this lady wound up being Sean Robinson's grandmother, and she would tell Sean all kind of stories about that painting. She swore to him that it was haunted. When he was a little boy, she told him that while she had the painting on display at her house, that she would sometimes see this large, black, shadowy figure lurking about in her home. She also admitted that she had heard these heart-wrenching cries coming from what sounded like a tormented man, or maybe an anguished man. But while she was in a confessing kind of mood one day, she actually tells him that she had heard that the artist that created that piece had actually mixed his own blood with the paint. And once he finished his work, he committed suicide. Now, Sean never really believed that the painting was haunted, but he always remembered those creepy stories that she told him when he was a little boy. And when she died, he decided that he was going to claim that painting. It was kind of interesting, and the crazy-ass stories that his grandmother told him about the artist, it, of course, would make one hell of a conversation piece in his house for parties or whatever the case may be. So he takes possession of the painting, and he takes it home, and he hangs it in his den. Well, it didn't take very long before Sean and his wife both start seeing this dark, shadowy creature lurking around their house. And after a few weeks, the appearances were accompanied by the sound of a man crying hysterically, along with a few other little noises. So Sean's not such a skeptic anymore, right? Well, Sean said that him and his wife had both heard crying coming from the corner of their bedroom. And the dark, shadowy figure, yeah, he's been spotted just kind of chilling, standing there at the foot of their bed, hanging out there, just watching over them. Sean says that this figure kind of appears to be a middle-aged man, but the features aren't very clear, just like the painting, I suppose. But anyway, the wife, she's had enough. She's terrified, and she puts her foot down, and she says she absolutely refused to stay in that house one more damn night with that painting. It had to go. I understand how she felt. Anyway, so the painting goes on tour for a little while, and it winds up being investigated by several paranormal experts. So thanks to its little tour it took, there's a whole lot of documentation that more than proves something is going on with this crazy painting. Hey, Belinda, Gavin, and David, how's everybody doing? Happy Mardi Gras to you children. So the most interesting out of all these reports was made by Mysteria Paranormal. You guys check this out. These guys actually visited one of the most haunted castles in the UK with the painting. This is not the first time I've seen people use a haunted relic to communicate with some other distraught spirit. For some reason, it will invoke one of the spirits to speak more clearly and kind of tell the investigators what's going on and give a better background of the story and help us to understand why the hauntings are there. So that was the whole idea behind taking the Anguished Man painting to Chillingham Castle. This is cool as shit, y'all. Check it out. So this whole thing was documented by Stephen Wagner on Paranormal Phenomena. Stephen's notes say this: it was on the evening of 18 May 2013 at Chillingham Castle that a group of people experienced events that were both terrifying and unexplained. None of the guests were prepared for what was about to happen in the early hours of Sunday morning. The room went icy cold when a large dark figure appeared in the middle of the seance circle. This big wooden bench starts banging on the floor all by itself. And at this time when that happened, John Blackburn, who was one of the other investigators, was actually directing questions to the painting, trying to find out more information about the haunting there in the castle. Well, in response to his questions, this bench flipped upside down violently by what was believed to be the ghost of John Sage, who was one of Chillingham Castle's resident spirits, a rather malevolent spirit as well. Wagner and his group think that Sage was pissed, obviously, and that he was reacting to this foreign and uninvited spirit that was in his castle. Well, according to several sources, John Blackburn of Mysteria Paranormal has stated that that was the strangest experience he has had in all of his years of supernatural and paranormal investigation. The interaction between the spirits at Chillingham Castle and the Anguish Man painting was witnessed by over 20 paranormal investigators, and it was very well documented. And there's my sweet boy, happy Mardi Gras baby. So, according to all of these people, you can find a whole lot of documentation on this. There are photographs, there are EVPs. I believe there's some video, and I've had a hard time putting my hands on it, but I have found it in the past. So Google that maybe. And if I can run across that link, maybe I'll throw that in my blog Friday as well, so you guys can check that out. Is anyone else's view of Lynn going crazy? Apparently there are ghosts in my machine, Belinda. It happens. I was having technical issues before the show started, so that's why I started a little bit late. Hopefully it will clear up whatever it is. Sorry, Gavin. So anyway, you know that all these artists kind of want to live on through their work. So I'm thinking that this dude that painted the Anguish Man by using a mix of his blood in the paint may have just stumbled onto something. And with other reports from Sean and his grandmother hearing all the crying, I'm betting that if this artist had it to do all over again, he would paint a little happier painting. I mean, think about it. If you hear Phantom crying, that's eerie as hell. But when there's something unseen in the room laughing its ass off at you, that's a little bit more disturbing in my book. Anyway, as far as Chillingham Castle goes, I'm going to tell you guys about it and all the madness that goes on there and all the madness that went on there on the grounds to cause all the madness that goes on there today in an upcoming show. I'm still working on that for you guys. All right, so if you're up for one more haunted relic, I've got another one for you. That's what we call lagniappe down here in the South. It means a little something extra. So I'm going to tell you guys about the Bassano vase. Again, another relic that's not very impressive in its appearance, but with this face, it's not really the looks that I found intriguing. This story comes from Italian lore, so Michael Martello might know a little bit about that. The screen is crazy looking, don't know how to post it. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what to do about it. I'm crazy looking, maybe it's just a reflection in me. So anyway, there's this silver vase that was created in the 15th century, and it was intended to be a wedding gift for an Italian bride that lived in a northern village close to Napoli. Well, on the night before her wedding, they find the bride laying on the floor, deader than hell, and she's clutching the vase. So her sister, who was one of the people who found the body there, takes possession of the vase, and she was going to seek vengeance. Somebody had apparently took out her sister, and it was on. Well, after her death, this vase was given to another one of her sisters, and not long after that, she suffered a similar fate as the first sister. So again, the vase was handed down to another surviving relative, and guess what? That relative died almost immediately as well. And then for the fourth time, the vase is given to somebody else in the family, and you get it, deader than hell, almost immediately after they take it into their possession. So the history of the vase at this point gets a little bit cloudy, but what we do know is that one of the surviving relatives of the bride boxes the evil relic up and she hides it. The rumor is that she had a priest bury it on hallowed ground, but nobody really knows for sure what happened. What we do know is that it surfaced again in 1988, and crumpled up inside of it was a small piece of parchment paper with some writing on it. And of course, it was a warning. It said, "Beware, this vase brings death." Well, the note was discarded, and the vase was immediately put up for auction, where it sold for about 4 million lira, which is a little bit over $1 million in U.S. currency. So the new owner was a local pharmacist, and he owned the vase for about 3 months before he drops dead from some mysterious circumstances. Well, his remaining family was terrified that the curse would fall on them, so they immediately sell it to a prominent local surgeon who didn't really believe in such things as curses. So guess what, y'all? 3 months later, this dude is dead as hell, and he's 37 years old. No reason for him to drop dead. Well, the surgeon's family wasn't so skeptical about this whole cursed relic thing now, right? So the rumors start circulating, and that certainly didn't help them get rid of this evil little vase. It took a while, but eventually they did find a buyer for it. It was an archaeologist. And this dude decides he's going to purchase it for his private collection. He was thrilled to have the vase because it was a true artifact from the Renaissance era. But even with his professional admiration, it wasn't going to be enough to protect him from this massive curse. Bet you've got this down pat by now. Everybody want to say it together? He was dead within 3 months. Got it. Okay, so the culprit this time was some kind of mysterious and undiagnosed infection that ravaged his body in a matter of days. So now we have yet another terrified family that needs to ditch this damn vase like right now. Not so much. Everybody and their grandmama has already heard about this shitstorm that comes along with this relic. So it took a while, and they, of course, took a massive loss, but they finally did find a sucker. Now, this next family was a little bit more familiar with the curse, so they didn't just buy it because they didn't know about the curse. They knew about it. Of course, everybody on the planet knew about the curse. But in their thinking, they were able to pick it up for a steal for way less than what it was worth. So they figured they would auction it off and make a healthy profit off of it. That didn't happen. Almost 1 month to the day after the vase was brought home, the new owner was dead. So the remaining family members are all freaking the hell out now, and they want this vase the hell out of their house. But there was not another sucker to be found, though. So everybody's freaking out. They're all stressed out. And in a fit of frustration, the owner's brother picks the vase up and he hurls it out of the second story window. Well, it just so happens that at that time there was a beat officer walking down the sidewalk, and the vase almost pegs the dude in the head. So he was a little bit on the pissed off side. And he calls the brother out of the house, and they have a discussion, go back and forth, and the cop writes him a ticket because, you know, it didn't hurt him, but it did piss him off, and it startled him. So he wasn't going to get away with that for nothing. So he writes a ticket, and he tells the dude, pick the vase up and take it back inside. Well, the dude absolutely refused to touch it. He said, you can take me to jail. I don't care what you do to me. I'm not taking the vase back inside. So after they argue over that for a little while, eventually the dude wins out. He goes back inside, and the cop picks up the vase and takes it to headquarters. Well, of course, everybody at headquarters knows about this vase because they're the ones making the police reports of these dead bodies that keep turning up. So the police chief tries to find somebody that would take it. They would donate it. They would, anything, give it away. Anybody that would take it. Nobody wanted it. No library, no museum. Nobody wanted anything to do with this damn vase. So after a while, the chief decides he's going to deal with it in his own way. So there were several local papers that documented that the vase had been buried in an undisclosed location. And the rumor is that it was placed inside of a lead box and buried on the grounds of an ancient cemetery. Well, hopefully it will remain undisturbed and dormant for eternity, or at least until the next dumb bastard digs it up and decides they're going to make a fortune off of it. Glenn, good to see you. Hey, Lawrence, how's everything in Crescent City tonight? It's crazy over there, right? Hey, Katie, haven't seen you in a while. And there's my girl, Susie. I hope you're feeling better, honey. I know you're having a hard time. So let's do maybe just one more crazy curse. I love the curse things. I think you're going to like this one too. Ever hear of a Dybbuk? I know a few of you hardcore creepy kids out there have. But the Dybbuk it's defined as a wandering spirit that possesses the body of a living person until they're exorcised. Okay, we got that. So one day this beautiful wooden wine box shows up at an estate sale. It had been the property of a woman that actually lived to be 103 years old. Now here's where it starts getting weird. Before this woman died, she requested that this box be buried with her. Because this was not typical Jewish ritual, the rabbi refused her last request, leaving her family responsible for her personal possessions. So, in September of 2001, there's this massive estate sale in Portland, Oregon, where the old woman's belongings are being auctioned off by her grandkids. So this local cabinet maker walks by, and he actually lays eyes on this wooden wine box, and he just, for some reason, he felt compelled to buy it. He had to have it. So at the end of the auction, the cabinet maker is approached by the granddaughter, who informed him of his grandmother's last wish. And she goes further and tells the guy that her grandmother always said that the box must not be opened. So the old woman was the only member of her family that actually survived the Nazi concentration camps. Her parents, her brother, sister, husband, and 3 children were all murdered at the same camp that she survived. She wound up escaping with some other prisoners to Spain, where she lived until the end of the war, and that's when she came to the United States. Well, this wine box had been purchased in Spain along with 2 other items that the woman bought with her when she relocated. Okay, so the cabinet maker began to feel that maybe he should leave the wine box with the family, because certainly it had to have some kind of sentimental value, right? Well, he offered the box back to the granddaughter, and she refused to touch it. Didn't want anything to do with it. And he assured her, I don't want a refund. You don't owe me anything. I just, want to do a good deed and leave this here with you. It was your grandmother's. So the granddaughter starts freaking the hell out, and she starts crying and screaming and running around, and she demands that this dude leave the property immediately. So he did. And he took his newly purchased relic with him. So the cabinet maker brings the box to his shop, and he puts it away with intentions on refinishing it and giving it to his mom for her next birthday. So the next day after he opens his shop up, he leaves to go run some errands. Well, not quite 30 minutes later, his cell phone rings, and it's the girl that works for him. Well, she's freaking the hell out. She's babbling some kind of shit about somebody's inside the shop with her, and she could hear glass breaking and swearing that all the security exits and the gates had unexplainably locked, and she couldn't get out. And as soon as the owner hears what's going on, his cell phone goes dead. So he hauls ass back to the shop, and when he gets there, he does find the gates and the doors still locked. He finally gets into the shop, and he finds this poor distraught girl curled up into a fetal position under the front counter. She's still sobbing hysterically. So he decides he's going to man up and go walk through the shop and find out what the hell is going on. And as he's walking through, he's noticed that every single light bulb in this shop has been shattered. The regular screw-in bulbs, 4-foot fluorescents, every single type of light bulb there was in this shop was destroyed. Not only was there the mess to contend with, but the entire shop, for some reason, now smelled like cat piss. No, the guy did not have a cat. So it's very interesting there. So he goes back to check on his employee, and he finds out that she's done hauled ass. She's gone. And she would never return to work and refused to talk about what happened to this very day. So a few days later, the mess is all cleaned up, the light bulbs are all replaced, Mom's birthday is coming up, and he decides he's going to get to work with restoring the cabinet. So what does he do? He opens the damn thing up. Inside, he finds a 1925 and a 1928 wheat penny, a lock of blonde hair and a lock of brown hair, a dried rosebud, a small gold wine cup, a small granite statue, and a cast iron candlestick holder. Kind of an odd combination of things. But the shop owner puts all the contents into the box and he returns them to the estate. But again, they adamantly refuse to take any of these things. So now he's back to restoring this wine box. And he gives the box a good look over and he decides he's not going to have to strip it down and refinish it. He's just going to rub it down with some lemon oil. That way he was definitely going to have it ready for his mom's birthday. Well, the next morning his mom calls and said that she's going to go stay with her sister for the next 2 days and that she would celebrate her birthday with him when she got back. Her birthday, just a small footnote here, just happened to be October 31st, my favorite holiday. So Mom gets back in town and she comes over to a shop and he presents her with the box. Well, before she's able to find out what kind of response she has about the box, while he's on his phone, one of the employees runs in screaming that something's wrong with his mother. So he runs into the room to find his mom completely unresponsive and tears are streaking down her face. So he hauls ass and gets Mom to the hospital by ambulance, and once she's stabilized, they realize that she can't speak and she's got partial paralysis. So in order for her to communicate, they give her a notebook that's got the alphabet written down on it, and she points out letters to spell words. Well, the first thing she says is no gift. And her son laughed, thinking that she'd forgotten all about the wine box. Well, he assured her, yeah, I gave you your gift. And she starts pointing at the notebook, and she spells out hate gift. So a few days later, since Mom hated the wine box, he gives it to his sister. Well, 2 days later, she returns it and says that the doors won't stay closed. He looks it over and he doesn't see any problem with it. So he waits a few days and then he offers it to his brother. So 3 days after that, the brother brings it back and says that the box smells like jasmines, and his wife said it smelled like cat urine. So then he gives it to his girlfriend, of course, because it smells like cat urine, right? Well, she didn't care for it either. And 2 days later, she brings it back to him and tells him, sell it. So he puts it for sale in the front of his shop. Well, the very next day, this young couple walks by and they fall in love with it. So, of course, they buy it. 3 days later, the cabinet maker goes back to open his shop up for the day, and he finds the box sitting at the front door with a note on it. The note says, this has a bad darkness. So now he's over it, and he winds up taking it home with him. And that's when he starts seeing what the problem was. Every night since he bought it home, he's had the same nightmare. He's dreaming that he's walking next to a friend of his, and then at some point in his dream, he turns to look into their eyes, and he finds something evil staring back at him. Then his friend's face starts to turn into this gruesome and demonic-looking old hag who proceeds to beat the shit out of him. So when he wakes up the next morning, he's all bruised and scratched up. So a few weeks into all this madness, he's done with getting his ass kicked by this freakish-looking hag every night. He's got to have a reality check. So he asked his brother and his sister-in-law to come over and stay for the weekend. Well, the first morning, they're all at the coffee table, and the sister starts complaining about having nightmares that night. And it was the same night that she had had, or the same nightmare that she had had when the box was in her house. So she starts describing this dream, and the room goes dead quiet. Come to find out, everybody there had had the same exact dream. And at that point, the dude calls his girlfriend and asks her if she'd had the dream. And sure enough, she had. So after this, the shit hits the fan in this house. These shadowy creatures start lurking around, and he's not the only one seeing them either. His guests saw him, and his neighbors saw him too. So he puts his box outside in a storage unit. That didn't last long either. A couple of nights later, he gets woke up by this fire alarm. So he hauls ass out to the unit to see what the hell's going on, and he opens the door and he's nearly knocked down by the smell of cat piss, but nothing's on fire. So he goes back inside and he finds that his house also smells like cat piss. Again, the dude has no cat. So he goes back to the unit, he grabs the box, and he starts investigating it on the internet. And he dozes off somewhere around 4:30 in the morning, and when he's woken up by the smell and feel of something or someone breathing on the back of his neck. When he looks around, he sees this large, shadowy figure dart out of the door and down the hall. So now that he's good and awake, he lists the box on eBay with a detailed outlay of his experience. And the box sells to Jason Haxton, who is a museum director. So Haxton has a bit of history to add to the legend now as well. Since he acquired the box, Haxton has had these prophetic dreams, I guess you call them, along with an array of health issues ranging from vision loss to hives. His house is infested with these shadowy creatures that float across the walls and the floors. And I guess anybody in their right mind would ask, well, why didn't he get rid of the damn thing? He bought it on eBay. Put it back on eBay. Somebody else will buy it now. Excuse me. So Haxton has kind of taken the same role as the grandmother did. And he has deemed himself the caretaker of this box. And he says that the box is safer in his hands than it is in the hands of some poor, unsuspecting bystander. So kudos to him for that. But since the paranormal activity began, this dude spent hours and hours researching the box and the Dybbuk that's attached to it. And he's personally consulted with scientists, Kabbalists, Wiccans, priests, all types of paranormal professionals. And for the past few years, he said it's been a little bit on the dormant side. It's still active, but not as crazy as it was. But what he did was he sealed it inside this acacia chest that's lined in 24 karat gold. And he says it's fairly neutral as long as there's nothing else negative there to invoke it. So Haxton has informed his entire family that he, of course, wishes to be buried with it, just like the 103-year-old woman that owned it from the get-go. His wishes are basically the same, just to keep it safe and protect everybody else. But in the meanwhile, Haxton has written a book and signed a movie deal. Now, the movie Possession that was released in August of 2012 is based off of the sinister history of the box and the spirit that's attached to it. And I'm sad to admit that I have not seen that film yet. But that can be remedied very easily. So, hey, chime in, Daywalkers. If you guys have seen this flick, give me a shout out. Let me know what you think about it. And is it worth me investing a couple of hours to check it out? If it is, then I'll definitely do that. Emily Nunez, I haven't seen you in ages, sweetheart. I hope you're doing well. Susan said you started talking about the Dybbuk box and there's been a steady whine on the feed. That's very interesting. So I'm through talking about the Dybbuk box, so maybe the whine will stop now. As a matter of fact, being that we're talking about wine, we might as well take a little break, and I'm sure the producers will be happy to stick a commercial in here at some point. Excellent. Okay, so I have another ghostly legend for you. It's not about a relic. It's actually about just a regular guy, I guess. Bad circumstances, though. You guys ever heard of Carl Pruitt or the Chain Strangler? I was kind of surprised. I had never heard this legend before, and I don't know why, because there's some really good stuff with this. So check this out, y'all. It's definitely earned its place in haunted history. So, the year is 1938, and the place is Pulaski County, Kentucky. Rhonda, where's that out? Sound out. So Carl's had a really shitty day at work. He's tired and he's frustrated, but he's looking forward to getting home to a good home-cooked meal and to see his wife and, hear about her day and tell her about his shitty day as well. Well, that didn't happen. Carl gets home and he finds his wife in bed with another man. So, needless to say, Carl comes a little bit on the unbolted side. While he's busy losing his mind, the other man creeps out the window and he runs for his life. Well, Carl's torn between rage and heartbreak, but rage won out. And he grabs this rusty chain and he wraps it around his wife's neck and he strangled the life from her. Can't say that I blame him. So Carl had exhausted his rage with that one murderous act, and now the heartbreak sets in. Not only does he find that he's incapable of living with the knowledge that his wife was screwing around on him, but now she's dead and by his own hands. So he grabs a gun and he turns it on himself. Tragic. So most folks would think that the story's pretty much over there, right? Those folks don't know me very well, do they? This is where the story actually starts getting good. So, after the autopsy, funeral arrangements are made, and for obvious reasons, Pruitt's wife's family demand that Carl's body be buried someplace else in some other cemetery far, far away from their daughter's remains. And so it came to be. Carl Pruitt's remains were interred miles away from his wife, and when visitors came to visit Pruitt's graves, they were confounded by what they found. The grass that covered his gravesite was dying, and something was happening to the headstone. After a while, it became kind of clear that the discolorations on the headstone seemed to form the links of a chain. With more and more curious visitors coming by to witness this odd phenomenon, it wasn't long before some ass clown decides they're going to vandalize Carl's resting place. Brilliant, right? Not so much. Here's what happened. So this jackass group of boys ride their bikes to the gravesite, and in an attempt to impress his little fucktard friends, one of the boys throws a rock at the headstone and he chips it. Yeah, well, they're all laughing it up and they think it's funny. Big bad bully broke a headstone. So feeling like they've accomplished something with their exhibit of bravery, these little dudes get on their bikes and they head for home. One of them didn't make it. As a matter of fact, it was the one that threw the rock. And it was some kind of a freakish accident where he ends up being strangled to death by the chain of his own bicycle. So the rumors of Pruitt's grave being haunted had already started running rampant throughout the region. And this unfortunate incident only fueled the fire, right? Well, everybody knew that Pruitt had murdered this boy from his grave. There was no doubt about that. The boy had hardly been in his grave for a week when his mother absolutely loses her shit. She's convinced that Carl had taken her son from her. So with tears in her eyes and rage in her heart, she grabs a nearby axe and she marches her ass to the cemetery, and she starts beating on Carl's grave. Well, the next time she's seen by anybody, she's hanging from her clothesline by her neck. So it's kind of odd. Nobody could figure out how she had become so entangled in those cords that she managed to strangle herself to death by hanging. And because of the circumstances, an investigation, of course, was open. And during the course of searching the property, an axe was found, and it was covered in what appeared to be concrete dust, and the edge was badly nicked and dented. So the investigators go out to check out Pruitt's grave, and when they get there, they find that the stone is intact. It's in perfect condition, with the exception of these odd chain links that somehow been etched. That was kind of weird. Apparently they don't like me talking about Carl Pruitt either. But we'll go ahead and try to get through it. Maybe the ghost will leave my machine alone. So, like I said, everything was fine with the headstone, with the exception of these chains that keep chain links that kind of keep showing up and etched into the marble. So Pruitt's grave has become taboo in this area, and no one even really wants to bring up the topic for discussion in fear that they too will meet some kind of horrific fate. But as usual, when there's a crowd, somebody's got to be an asshole, right? So one day a local farmer's driving his horse and buggy past the cemetery. And in the buggy with him is his entire family. So I guess he decides he's going to try to prove some kind of point about the Pruitt's legend. With no notice, he reaches down and he grabs his rifle and he shoots at Pruitt's headstone. Well, the sound of the unexpected gunshot spooks the horses and they start hauling ass. So now the buggy's out of control. The farmer's family all jumps out to safety, but the farmer stayed on to try to regain control of the buggy, and well, of course, that didn't happen. And before the buggy crashed into some nearby trees, he was thrown from it, and while in midair, the reins somehow managed to wrap around his neck, and they strangled him to death before the buggy even settled from impact. So now everybody's talking about Pruitt's cursed grave again, and the population, of course, was convinced that Pruitt was somehow causing all these deaths from beyond his own grave. And I can kind of see why, right? I gotta say, I'd probably be thinking along the same lines. I might be taking the dude a bottle of whiskey or something. Hey, we're cool, Slick. Have a drink on me. So anyway, these two local police officers, they catch wind of the stories. And laughing it all off, and they're joking around. Yeah, this is all bullshit. These two morons with badges decide they're going to roll out and prove everything's just a big hoax. So they go out there and they take pictures of each other standing by Pruitt's headstone. And I guess they did that so they'd have evidence of how brave they really were. Well, only one of them's going to survive to have those bragging rights. However, I find it highly unlikely that he bragged at all. So these two cops get back into their car and they head back downtown. And as they're leaving the cemetery, the driver sees that there's this bright light following behind them. So he speeds up to get away. That didn't work. So as it goes, this guy is flooring it trying to get away, and the car slides out of control. The passenger was ejected from the car and he survived, but the driver, not so much. The driver was nearly decapitated in the crash. The car came to rest between two fence posts, and the barbed wire fencing that was strung between those two fence posts, of course, wrapped around his neck, and that was all that was holding his head in place. So later on in the 1940s, most people that lived in the area learned to avoid the cemetery altogether and feared they'd somehow piss old Pruitt off and lose their own lives. Again, there's always that one asshole, right? So this guy in particular, he's sick of hearing the legends. Well, he grabs a hammer and he heads for the cemetery, and he's intent on destroying Pruitt's headstone. And the people that lived close by and some people who were walking by or whatever, they could hear the sound of the hammer as it was beating on this stone marker. Well, moments later, the sounds of these thuds were replaced by this blood-curdling scream, and then all of a sudden, everything goes silent. So when people decide they're going to go check out and see what happened, they find the man lying face down in front of the open gate of the cemetery. The chain that normally was used to lock the gates was wrapped around his neck, and he'd strangled to death before anybody was able to get to him. So shortly after that, the property was purchased by a mining company, and all the graves were exhumed and moved to other nearby cemeteries along with their headstones. But Pruitt's stone, however, was removed and then disposed of in an unnamed place. And since all that happened, there haven't been any other occurrences concerning Carl Pruitt's curse. Not really wanting to push it a whole lot more tonight. I do have one other little legend. Maybe we won't have any more issues before we can get through it. I'm going to try to give it the rundown real quick. So you guys cross your fingers with me. This is an urban legend about a critter called the rake. Have you ever heard of the rake? Not a garden tool. It's a beastie. What did Brandon say? Be damned if I would work there. Yeah, I hear you. So apparently there's some folks that do know about him, but most of these folks aren't really talking. Check this out. So in New York during the summer of 2003, these stories start circulating about this strange human-looking like creature that starts making its way around on the press and on the internet. And then all of a sudden, everything goes hush and nobody's talking about it anymore. All the online postings and reports just unexplainably disappeared, and nobody knew anything about it anymore. Well, several witnesses, mostly in New York, but some were in Idaho, had told their stories to the press, and they posted their experiences online. And they're just as dumbfounded as everybody else over how all their interviews and postings suddenly vanished overnight. In protest, these witnesses banded together and began their own investigations. Well, by early 2006, these guys had discovered documents dating back to the 12th century, and the dated stories were very similar to their own experiences. Most of them ended abruptly, leaving them with no other information than what they already had. So one of the documents that they discovered was a suicide note from 1964. And in the note, this victim explained that he'd been plagued by this creature and could no longer bear the horrors that it brought upon him. The rake was haunting him day and night. And this poor bastard was so terrified that he felt his only means of escaping this creature was to take his own life. That's pretty tragic. There was a similar note that was discovered that was dated back to 1880. This victim had looked into the eyes of the rake and had been tormented by him ever since. And it's also believed that this dude also took his own life. And this one's really interesting too. It's an excerpt from a ship's log that's dated back to 1691. It seems that this captain was awoken one night just after having made landfall. So he begrudgingly opens his eyes and he finds out that he wasn't alone. Yeah, you guessed it. At the foot of his bed, this horrific creature stood studying him. In the captain's notes, he stated that it took everything from him, and he was left with the knowledge that it would always return to him. And then that was the last entry that was made in the journal before the captain and his entire crew disappeared. Now, I know those examples are old as hell, but guess what? I'm getting to the good stuff, y'all. This is a statement from 2003 made by a wife and the mother of a family that experienced an encounter with the rake. She says that one evening after the family had returned home from a trip to Niagara Falls, they were all exhausted. So she saw the kids off to bed, and she and her husband also turned in for the night to get some rest. Well, at about 4 a.m., the wife was awakened by what she thought was her husband going to the bathroom. So she reaches over to steal the covers back from his side of the bed, and she discovers that he's still in bed with her. So she apologizes for stealing the covers and waking him up. Well, when he rolls over to face her, he suddenly jerks his feet from the end of the bed and he grabs a hold of her, but he doesn't say anything. She looks down at the foot of the bed, and she sees what her husband saw. What she described was this disfigured, naked man that resembled a hairless dog. She said its body was twisted as if it had been hit by a car or something. And this creature it stood there staring at him from the foot of the bed, and suddenly in this awkward flurry of motion, it decides to make its way along the side of the bed, and now it's face to face with her husband. The rake stood there staring at him for a few seconds, and then he reached up and touched her husband's knee before it hauled ass in the hallway and headed for the kids' rooms. So they jump out of bed and run behind it to go take care of their kids, and when they make it to the hallway, the wife turns on the lights, and she sees this creature, and it's crouched over about 20 feet away, and it's covered in blood. So the creature then bolts down the stairs, and the parents, of course, run into the kid's bedroom, and they find her daughter badly injured, and of course she was covered in blood. The child spoke only one time, and she said, "He is the rake." So they bundled the kid up and they loaded her into the car. The wife decided she's going to stay home and take care of the other kid and file a police report. So later on after that, she would join the husband and the daughter at the hospital, and they would kind of regroup and figure out what the hell had just happened. So after they get to the hospital, the news starts getting out and people are starting to talk. Kind of phased out there for a minute. So everybody knows what's going on. So on the way home from the hospital, of course, they were in separate cars. The wife goes home with the son, and the husband is coming home with the daughter. Well, something happened with the car, and he drove into the lake, and neither one of them made it home. So, being a small town, the news of this terrifying encounter traveled like wildfire. And the police at first were kind of trying to help, and then the local newspapers and television stations were falling all over themselves to get this story. Then all of a sudden, it all stopped. And the story was never printed. The TV station never followed up on their report. None of this was ever aired. So it was kind of getting weird, right? Well, several months passed, and the wife and her son had been staying at a hotel near her mom's. Well, when she finally decides that they're ready to go back home, she begins investigating on her own. So she located a handful of folks that had had similar encounters as hers, and guess what? Their stories fell dead with all of a sudden without any kind of explanation, just the same as hers had. But the most troublesome similarity was that the ones that survived the encounter with the rake would generally find that it was the first encounter that they would have of many, and those were typically the ones that had not been touched by the rake. The ones that the rake decided to reach out and touch were the ones that died shortly thereafter, typically pretty violent deaths. So after having made all these discoveries, the woman puts a digital recorder next to her bed every night, and every morning she kind of scans through and finds that there's nothing really out of the ordinary, at least up until the first day of the third week. So when she's replaying the recording, she hears this unnatural and shrill voice. It's so shrill that it's impossible to listen to at all. So not even long enough to just transcribe what she thought was being said. So now she remembers hearing nothing the night that her husband and her daughter died. However, upon hearing this shrill pitch of this inhuman voice, she was somehow made aware that the rake had indeed spoken to her husband and obviously to her daughter. Now, she hasn't seen the rake since that night that they died, but she knows for sure and for a fact that she has returned to her while she's sleeping. And every night she falls asleep, she's freaking terrified that she's going to wake up and find this creature standing there at the foot of her bed again. Well, since all these folks banded together and began publicizing their encounters, more and more people are starting to join in with their stories, and some have even provided some photographic evidence that this beast does exist. So, if you are in the New York or Idaho area, you may want to just make sure your windows and doors are locked up extra tight, because the rake could be watching you, and you damn sure don't want him to touch you, so make sure the bastard doesn't get in your house, right? All right, folks, I apologize for all the technical issues I'm having tonight. Either I have pissed off the spirits, or there are some kind of technical issues with my computer, one way or the other. We'll have that straightened out for next week, hopefully. But thank you guys for joining me. Happy Mardi Gras to all of you. And I hope that I will see you all back here next week on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show. Because you know you got to come get your creepy on. Where else are you going to get your creepy on but here, right? All right, folks. Thanks again for joining me. And I will see all of you again next Tuesday night at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. And check us out at theedgeradio.us. Y'all have a good night.